We'll reconvene the 23-24 Budget Committee of Clackamas County at this time. As we begin, Mr. Cernat.
I just want to disclose a potential conflict. I've discussed it with County Council, and he assures me I do not have a conflict, but just to be safe, I want to disclose. I do currently work for a transportation engineering company that does do business with the county from time to time. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. With that, we will, our task today is deliberating on the budget, which we received in its entirety yesterday, and we had public comment regarding the budget last night. And so today is dedicated to deliberation of that budget as presented. At this point, Mr. Schmidt, would you like to say anything before we open it up for questions and comments from the committee?
Yes, Chair Parks. So yes, as you stated, you have now received the proposed budget for Clackamas County for fiscal year 2023-2024. It is entirely now up to you, committee, to ask any clarifying questions, to have any discussion, but your charge is to leave here by approving the budget, whatever changes you wish to make or as is. So we'll stay as long as it needs to occur that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Does any member of the Budget Committee have any questions or comments about the budget as presented? Mr. Commissioner West.
I think Commissioner Savas was first. I can defer to him first.
For some reason, it's hard to see that.
So thank you, Chair. I just want to pose a scenario. Gary, maybe you could expand on it. And while I do respect that if people want to bring something back in or fund something, the principle is, find out where you're going to cut. I think that's fair. However, I don't want to do that hastily. One thing I did not say on opening day, I'm going to say it now, just to make my point, is that, and I've said it before, Gary, you and I have talked about it, is I really believe that investing budget dollars should be done as most effectively as possible, and metrics and data guide where we should spend money and where we should not. Or if we have a prioritize it towards what's most effective. So what's not in here very much, to some degree it is, but we don't have that level of detail, and the managing for results is not really to the point in which we both envision it being here today, right? So with that said, I just wonder that in the absence of good data or asking, I don't want to task staff with going back and finding out what is the results of this particular service being provided, whether it's provided internally, whether it's provided externally by a nonprofit. What is their success rate? How effective is that? So in the absence of really tasking staff with all that work and all that analysis and giving us the time to consider it, we certainly have room between now and June 22nd. But also, you've also have usually a little bit of your administrative fund to make small adjustments. And I'm not here to ask you what that is, but I just want, as we guide discussions today, whether if it does get, I won't say entangled, but if it does get dragged out into more detail that we don't have, I would prefer that we take our time and utilize either the time between now and June 22nd to do that research, and or what options are there for minor adjustments with some other funds. So that's what I just want to put out there, that we don't have just one choice. We have a couple ways of approaching some discussions where we might be passionate about adding something back in.
Okay. Any comment back to that?
Yes, and Commissioner Savas and I have spoken about this, and you've raised it previously. We do have Performance Clackamas, which is our strategic plan measurement for the county. The commissioners have a plan, and each department has a plan. Within their budget document, the binder, and online, each department does talk about their metrics and how they've measured that. Certainly, we need to do better, and we plan on doing better of aligning the budget entirely to metrics. And that's not there yet, and I will say that is the case. Commissioner Savas is correct. So as a budget committee, and you can see in your script in the draft motion, you're not budgeting down to the line item here. You're approving a general county budget of $1.2 billion. So you can give some suggestions for adjustments or direct me to make adjustments. My advice is if you do want to make adjustments, just direct the administrator, figure it out. work with department leadership and figure it out, and then bring it back to the Board of Commissioners. It doesn't have to come back to this Budget Committee. You will have done your work, and that does, as Commissioner Savas says, gives us a few weeks here to work with the board directly before the final budget is adopted on June 22nd.
Okay, thank you for that. Commissioner West.
Thank you, Chair Parks. I think this gets a little bit to my question. Yesterday, or when we started the process day one, you're like, you guys will stay here every day until we figure this out. And so I was like, oh my gosh, but I thought the budget wasn't due till the June 22nd. So are we going to be here till June? Because this has been quite the budget process. So I was kind of hoping that you could walk me through, like, what are those mandatory timelines? What could this process look like as we kind of start to deliberate for myself as a new guy in the public?
Yes, so Oregon budget law is that there's a budget committee that receives a proposed budget, and then you approve a budget, which then goes to the governing body, in this case, the Board of County Commissioners, who can then adopt, modify, or reject that budget. So this is just one step in that process. So when I did say, Commissioner, you're right, I did say that when you started. What I meant, though, is if you want to make major scale changes to especially the proposed reductions, I need your guidance. Don't tell me, Gary, we're going to take, I disagree with 6 million of the cuts you are proposing. I need your help to tell me where else do you want to take it. But if it's minor adjustments you want to make, you're just going to give that guidance to me, and then you've done your role as a budget committee, and then myself and staff can work on it over the ensuing weeks and bring it back to the Board of County Commissioners, who are the final authority, the final decision makers, and you will do that on June 22nd.
So what I understand from that is that the bottom line on that is, yes, we approved today the budget, which is the revenue for the county and including the expenditures for the county in a balanced, sustainable budget. But then when it gets to the Board of County Commissioners to actually adopt it on June 22nd, any information that has come in that interim period of time would be considered if it's viable information and could be then placed in as part of the budget reduction or increase or program or whatever.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Just double checking. Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, my first question has to do with the amount of the general fund proposed for this next fiscal year. What was the general fund, Administrator Schmidt, of this current year? 160 million in that area?
Help me, Sandra and Elizabeth. I believe it's around 160, but please confirm.
Okay,
They're
give me
doing it.
1 minute. This is Sandra Montoya, and I'll pull it up.
160.8 million, is that right?
And I apologize, I've got hundreds of numbers running through my head, so I can't remember my address at this point.
Don't worry, we all have the same problem this morning.
Okay, the general fund in the current fiscal year, and I'll give you the amended number, total 467 million. If you are referring to the general fund support number, which is what is given to departments,
Right.
that number is 156 million in the current fiscal year.
Okay, and that 156 million is going to get us through the end of June without a supplemental budget? Is that right?
I believe we've got, that is the amended number, so we do have a couple of supplementals that adjust that number, but roughly that is the number.
Okay, and so for the proposed budget for 23-24, that number becomes 155 plus 4.7, or 159.7 million, right?
Okay, so if we're doing comparison, this year, and I'll give you exact number, 155,619,846. So 100, and now I'm going to round, 156 million, or 155.6. This next year, in 23-24, we are proposing 156 million.9. So it's actually increased by roughly 300,000.
Okay. I need someone to explain how we go to a 4.5 COLA for this next fiscal year, 4.5% of like 69 million. and only come up with a $300,000 increase in the general fund. I need to understand how that happened.
Okay, so Gary or Chair, can I answer? Because everything in the general fund, think our household budgets. There's increases and there's decreases. So, takes and puts, and we're getting more revenue from property tax, so that's an increase that we can share with the departments.
Yeah.
And then we've got, on the subtraction side, we've got increases to personnel, we've got increases to materials and services, so those are taking away. Now, on the revenue side again, we've got this cost allocations that the general fund used to spread to all of the departments. That the general fund used to subsidize for all of the departments. And in 23-24, this new methodology is now charging departments, and it's charging the outside-facing departments. That's revenue to the general fund. So that's a savings. So again, all of these, there's ups, downs, and
Okay.
the net is that it's only a 300,000 increase. It really is a success story, even if it doesn't feel like it's playing out that way. But if you remember that trajectory that I showed you of the reserves and the contingency and unappropriated, and we said we need to lower the base. That, in effect, is what we have done for 23-24, because we had to lower the base of the total budget so that we could allow small increases over time to make those anticipated payments.
Okay, thank you, Senator Montoya. That helps me. The next question I have has to do with the county administration budget. I want to talk about equity, diversion, and inclusion. I don't understand this line. We have $828,403 under the general fund 100, but when we get over to the yellow block general fund support budget, it's only $60,000 for 3.8 FTEs and some 3.6 million ARPA. Administrator Schmidt, could you explain how that $828,403 is, where does that money come from?
Yes, so actually, thank you for drawing this to our attention, Commissioner Shull. So that $60,000 actually is an error. We need to remove that because I committed to you I was going to remove this office from general funded and move it to cost allocation instead. So right away, there's a $60,000 savings. Keep that in mind, Board Budget Committee. So this office funds 3 staff members as well as programmatic support for programs and support to the organization. So it's going to be entirely cost allocated in this new budget. You heard about the cost allocation model moving forward.
Okay. Do I understand that the $828,403 comes from allocated costs from the various departments? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. As many of you have heard me say before, I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America as amended. When it comes to issues regarding the color of skin, race, gender, national origin, and religion, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which people of color, white people, died to bring to the Congress of the United States. And I believe that the Constitution of the United States as amended and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is what we need to live by. I take exception to equity, inclusion, and diversity. What I've seen is that it foments tension. And I personally do not support 3.8 FTEs or the $828,403 that you have in your budget to pay for EID. That's my feeling. I believe that all people need to be treated with equality. It's my observation that this county does treat people with equality. I believe that our Human Resources Department is capable of operating solely under the Constitution of the United States as amended and the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I do not support any allocated funds to support equity, inclusion, and diversity, to support 3.8 FTEs in this county. And I want everybody on this board to know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I understand what Commissioner Scholl is trying to convey. Another example I'm going to use just to help make this overall point is that there is also a lot of federal regulation right now that puts an emphasis on climate and CO2 reduction. So therefore, monies become available that have to really meet that criteria for clean air, greenhouse gas emissions, and so forth. Okay, some like that, some do not like that. But nonetheless, the funding streams are dependent upon, or receiving grants are dependent upon our ability to meet those requirements. Title II and Title VI, getting back to diversity, inclusion, equity, equality, all of those things, and a lot of those things that Commissioner Scholl has mentioned are also requirements that we have to meet. So therefore, I think it's imperative for us to work within the framework in order to receive a lot of the federal funding. If we were to just not have the staff and the expertise to assure we're meeting Title II and Title VI, we are putting ourselves at a huge financial disadvantage, and also serving the citizens of this county with either the services provided or the protections provided in Title II and Title VI. Thank you.
Chair Parks, may I speak to that?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm aware of no state requirement, no state law that would mandate that this county pay for the expenses as set forth on the equity, diversion, and inclusion line of the county administrator's budget. We can do those things that you mentioned, Commissioner Savas, without the specific dedication of 3.8 FTEs and without the specific dedication of $828,403 of allocated funds that we're taking out of the budgets of our different departments. Again, we can operate within the law of the federal government of the United States and the state of Oregon without dedicating specific funds and FTEs to equity, inclusion, and diversity. Thank you very much.
Citizen Lee, and then Commissioner Savas.
Yes, I have to agree with Commissioner Savas. I work in the realm of grants, and I know that if you don't have a DEI policy in place, there are a number of federal grants that you can't even access. So as much as this is a significant expenditure, I'm not sure what we could do to avoid doing this without losing considerable future funding.
Chair Parks, on that matter?
Sir, Commissioner Savas, was it before you, sir?
Let him go ahead. That's fine.
All right,
That's fine.
thank you. He'll yield to you, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. And Ms. Lee, do you want to keep your card up or do you want to put it down? Ms. Lee,
Okay.
your card.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand this thing about the grants, but we receive many grants in this county for many different things without having a specific department to support it. Okay? In other words, this county and Human Resources are more than capable of receiving and being prepared to receive grants without the specific dedication of 3.8 FTEs and $828,000 of allocated funds. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Savas?
Okay, well, instead of talking about, for now, the philosophical and the consequences, I think, of maybe how that would be interpreted by people that feel they've been marginalized, putting that aside for a moment here, because it is important, but I want to just speak to the business side of it, which is really talking about the monies and the dollars. So we have a number of departments that apply for grants. Actually, you know, you already heard, Commissioner Scholl, that we have 150 some odd million dollars of general fund, right? But we also have a $1.something billion budget, which is made up of a tremendous amount of grants. So that ought to put in proportion that we have a considerable amount of grant monies that come in. Now, each department could hire someone and make sure they have that expertise, you know, in each department for every grant. But that would be an extra expense probably for every division of this county to have someone to make sure they're meeting the requirements. So I don't know. I'm not here to micromanage in a sense, and I'm not saying anyone is. But I would look to the administrator and say, what is the most efficient way of meeting the DEI requirements? Is it better to do it with a small group of people, or 2 or 3, or should every division have staff to do that to meet those requirements? I'm just looking from a fiscal standpoint, what's the most efficient way? Is this the way we're approaching it, the way with having a department to do that, to help that, to assure that? Or should every department have their own embedded staff times 1, 2, or 3, which may be more expensive? I'm just asking the fiscal question.
Yeah,
so my question is to Gary.
Judge Schmidt, do you have a response to that?
I do. I want to preface, I created the Office of Equity and Inclusion in 2020. It was my decision. The board did not direct me to do that. And I did it in a financially neutral, or cost-neutral way. It did not cost a penny. I used other organizational changes within the Office of the County Administrator, and the board blessed that. Yes, of the many, many functions of the current Equity and Inclusion Office, one of the most important functions is to ensure we're meeting Title II and Title VI federal requirements, which are for any federal dollars a public agency receives. To either receive the funds or maintain the funds, you must meet Title II and Title VI. That is an ongoing effort that organizational-wide this office helps coordinate. And it is more than just one person doing it or several embedded or people within the organization. So I believe, and I understand the general fund draw, which is why I removed it from the general fund and have cost allocated it instead. So this is just one of the many functions of this office, but that's a very, very important one that I think is important. We must do at the organization. And it seems, in my mind, wise to centralize it rather than decentralize it through multiple departments.
Well, Gary, I'm going to follow up on that. Is that what's the most efficient fiscally? What's the most efficient way of delivering or providing that oversight to make sure we're meeting the requirements? Should it be embedded in every department with staff, or should it be centralized?
Well, in my opinion, centralized, just like the other centralized services. If every department had their own human resources recruitment folks, that would be a nightmare. If every department had to do their own payroll, I mean, that's why we have centralized services at the organization.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Scholl.
Well, one final comment in response to the administrator's statement. EID came about in 2020, but for decades before that, this county operated just fine without an Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity office. We managed the federal requirements just fine. And again, I believe that the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity office only foments friction, and I believe it's an unnecessary expense. I know that I spoke to the county administrator several times about EID over the last couple of years, and he realized that perhaps funding it through something other than the general fund might be a good idea. But $828,403 is allocated funds that comes out of the hide of our departments. Again, it's my opinion that federal requirements could be satisfied just fine without this department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions pertaining to this year's proposed budget? Commissioner Schrader,
No questions. I just want to...
could you speak into the microphone?
I will. Commissioner Shull, I have nothing but respect for you and the service that you've given this country. You have put yourself in harm's way numerous times. I'm going to disagree with you with this because of the history of what this country has experienced. I recently saw a movie called Till, and the movie was about Emmett Till, who was a young 14-year-old, I believe, who went from the city to visit his...
What, Martha?
Martha, could you pull
When
it?
he went from the city, this is a little emotional, but sometimes we need these narratives to help clarify why we're moving forward with some of the things that we do. He went to visit relatives in Mississippi. Evidently, he went into a store, and the movie he whistled at a white woman. This was 1955. I think I was 2 years old, so I don't remember that. Because of that action, he was brutally beaten and lynched. And it was so bad that the only way they could identify him was because of a ring that he had on his finger. It's probably one of the most powerful movies I've seen in a long time. It's called Till. The woman who played Emmett Till's mother deserved an Oscar for this. So the reason we have this is because, not because we don't support the Constitution and see it, but we have to constantly be reminded that we live in a culture, sometimes, not sometimes, a good portion of the time, that is unfair to people who look or perceive differently. And there have been atrocities committed because of that. This, to me, was an atrocity. And one of the results, the first Civil Rights Act was in 1957, and that was President Eisenhower, who was a Republican, who I think part of that was the result of the atrocity. And I was a child during the Civil Rights Movement, and I could go through the history of folks that were murdered or killed or for fomenting the tension. It's always going to be tension with this because I've lived it. My son's Korean. I can't tell you the number of times he got called Chinky Boy when he was playing soccer. I can't tell you the amount of times he would come home and cry. Okay, look, it happens. And the reason we have diversity, equity, and inclusion, so we remind people it's important. I understand if we need to cut the budget somehow, maybe not a full department, but please understand it still happens. It still happens today. I worry about my boy every day because, he's Asian American. And I have Chinese friends who've gotten spit on and the whole 9 yards. So it's across a continuum. So the reason we do this is not just because of the law. We as a culture and as Oregonians and Americans need to understand that those kinds of behaviors are harmful to one another. And to me, the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece is the constant reminder that we have to be sensitive to this, and we have to honor the fact and remember our history that has not always been fair, kind, and sometimes murderous towards people that are different than us. That's the way I see it. But no disrespect meant, because you have defended this country in a way that I never have, and you defend the rights of people, no matter what race, color, or religion they are. So I'm just trying to describe it in a different narrative of why I think we need to have at least something that keeps us on this track, because I know as a fact, as a mother, it still happens today. It still happens. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Respectfully, sir, you are a fine commissioner and a good American, but I'm just trying to give you a different narrative here.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. Commissioner West.
I love this country. And I'm proud to be a gay man. Raising a diverse family in the best country in human history. I resent my family and myself ever being looked at through an immutable trait. I resent ever being told that I'm a victim, my son's a victim, because of our immutable traits. I want the dignity and the honor to be judged by my character and by my merit and by my achievement. I don't want to live in an America where my son is told that his father victimizes him because of the color of his skin, because of some type of privilege in the ether that I can or cannot control. I want my son to know that he can overcome any challenge in this country, regardless of the sins of our past, but my God, have we done a great job becoming better. I can look all up and down Clackamas County, our local community, across our history from Frederick Douglass to Barack Obama to Justice Thomas, and I can see how we have worked to become a more unified union, living up to our values and who we are. Sometimes when we look at a budget, it's about talking about our values. Money is not just some abstract thing that is debits and pluses and minuses and this $1 million here and that $1 million there, but it speaks to our county's values. We have to be honest about what the value system, the worldview of EDI, DEI, and all the rest. And it's not just about title this or that, 2, 6, 9, it's not about that. It's not about trying to thread the needle to figure out how we can get this little pot of money so that we can do this little thing that we want to do in this program, but what is the value that we are promoting within our county? We may always struggle with issues like race. We may always struggle with people being different than us. That may be part of the human condition. But this county, the people in this room that I get to serve with, and I believe overall most Americans are good people that are not racist, that don't look to marginalize and hurt others. And often we're told that no fault of our own, just by our own existence, that we do that, or we racialize everything. And sometimes this EDI, the philosophy that drives some of this EDI work does that. you can't come speak in this group because you didn't have this level of oppression, or you weren't intersecting with these different racial groups, and you weren't, it really tends to be something that does not bring our county and local communities together, but I think divides it. I had no plan to speak about this today. And it's emotional for me and my family as we chart these kind of new perilous waters around race, sex, gender, and all the rest in our communities today that often has become such a wedge and so polarizing that we can't even enjoy a football game, a barbecue, or Christmas without some type of unnecessary strife, that realizing that we all put on our pants the same day, have the same American values that unify us to do the same important work in our communities day after day. And we allow immutable traits to be used as a wedge to divide. I could sit here and tell you my family sob story, my personal experiences where bad people treated me poorly. I could tell you my kid's story, and there wouldn't be a dry eye in this room. But those things don't define me. People that treat me badly don't get to tell me I can't succeed in my God in this country and in this county. If I do the work, if I show up, if I try my best, I get to be a county commissioner and I get to do great things. And my son can go play potentially football in a Division I scholarship from Oregon's broken foster care system and being marginalized to being now no longer a statistic but a success. Not one thing about my immutable traits stopped me from achieving anything great in my life. And I sure as hell won't let this county have an ideology that tells anybody else that because of their immutable trait that they are a victim. I won't live with a victim mentality or an oppressed mentality over my head when I know that if I show up and do the work and I can help those come alongside me to do that work, that they'll be successful. At the crux of it, that's the problem of the ideology, just the tension that nobody was wanting to talk about as we dance around 2-6, this or that and this, and where's our funding coming from? It is an issue of values. And I don't know, I think that is a lens that we have to look at that. What is our value system? And has that value system of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or EDI, has it been a political wedge, an ideological tool? Has it been divisive, or has it actually brought people together? I have emails and I have evidence that I could put together where I think at times our EDI department have been incredibly divisive in their operations and how they have spoken to different staff people, specifically people in law enforcement, making them feel marginalized within the culture of the county because of the color of their skin and the work they do. I don't want that message coming out to our law enforcement, men and women, law enforcement, or anybody. I don't want anybody's immutable trait to be any reason for any type of discussion within this county. It's morally wrong to judge somebody based on something they cannot control, or to marginalize or tell them that they have some type of character flaw innate in them because of the color of their skin or because of their gender, who they are, who they love. I want you to judge me on my ideas, on my values, on my character, not that I'm married to a man or have a black son. And EDI just does that. It distills who I am by my immutable traits. It only talks about that. What's funny is, if I walked into this room and sat in the back and none of you guys actually knew who I was, you could say, oh, that guy has a beard, he's probably wearing cowboy boots, and he's probably likes this type of music, and he probably drives this type of car, and he probably is this type of person or this type of man in Clackamas County. And if you talk to me for 2 minutes, you would know that who I am is so much more diverse than that, so much more multifaceted than my immutable traits, so much more beautiful and unique. Every single one of us is so much more beautiful and unique than the color of our skin or who we're with. That is what the EDI work, I believe, robs from the individual. That's why I think Commissioner Scholl, you bring up a fair point on the funding of this. I have no idea how this is going to land. I had no idea I was going to be talking about this, but I think our value systems are important. It's a little bit of an emotional topic for me and for everybody, but I think that we should consider those thoughts when we talk about moving forward with this, is that I want us to have work that brings our people together in a way that's based on merit, equality, and fairness, and does not distill people down by their characteristics or how people groups have been historically marginalized, and ignores the triumphs that we have overcome throughout our history to get to where we are today. I'll yield that back.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
I appreciate everyone's comments here today. I had a unique childhood. I had family members, have had family members, different race, gay members of my family as well. I think one thing we find that probably a lot of us around this table, all of us is that a lot of us are leaders, a lot of us are bold, a lot of us can overcome that. But we're all wired. The good Lord made us all different. And while we can stand on our own 2 feet, not all can. And those people that we all have gifts, those people that may not have the ability to be bold enough also have a gift that makes our country and our people all diverse, and it brings value to everything. In the context of the budget, in the context of the fiscal, I try to keep it there. But as we talked about yesterday, we also talked about morale and how you build an organization and keep the morale within the organization what it is. And you do that as best you can, whatever it may be, whatever the issues are, right? People can argue that they're upset because their dollars, their transportation dollars are building sidewalks and bump outs for the people with disabilities for ADA bump outs. It's a lot of money, sure. The court decided that. Our lawmakers decide where we are. I had to work within the confines of the law all my life. It's more complicated when you're a business owner. It's more complicated when you have employees. And it's also more complicated when you're trying to get good people in your organization. And I think we made that point yesterday. But I think everyone needs to feel that they belong. And that's really, I think, the purpose. Now, we can all view that maybe a program does this or it's intended to do that or the consequences are. I'm not going to argue that. I think people got their arguments and nothing's perfect. I think the more laws we make, the more consequences we have, unintended. They're not all good. Some are, some aren't. But we're here as the Budget Committee today, and I don't believe it's an ideological decision, but I can also say that as the Budget Committee, I think the morale and the sense of belonging and making sure we grow, maybe everyone brings in value and we deliver good services to all the people we serve, by the way, which all don't. The people we serve are more important than, frankly, the people that are employed here. But they're all important. But we have to realize that everyone needs to feel they belong. And I grew up in a family where we didn't feel we belonged. And I can say that, well, it's fact. I mean, I had friends and family that lost their lives because either the color of their skin or the fact that they spoke a different tongue and they didn't speak English, okay? I was forbidden to speak my language when I turned 5, when I entered the public school system. And I was told, if you can't speak English, don't talk at all. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, I would like to thank my colleague, Commissioner West, for your character, your wisdom, your sensitivity, and your lived experience. I feel empowers you to make the statement you made today. And I like to remind everyone that all men and all women are created in the image of God. And with that, Chair Parks, I would like to make a motion this morning.
Go ahead, sir.
I move that the line of equity and diversity and inclusion in the County Administrator's Department budget summary by fund, the amount of $828,403 of allocated costs, the ARPA amount of $3.6 million be moved to the BCC office, and the FTE, again, the FTEs and the funding for equity, inclusion, and diversity be stricken from the budget.
A motion's been made to strike the EDI from the budget. Is there a second to that motion? Hearing none.
I'll
motion
second
di-
that.
I'm sorry. Pardon me?
I second the motion.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Discussion. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I have not commented on this because I'm listening to the Board of County Commissioners where we are clearly split in half. And I take no pleasure in being the deciding vote on either one of these. But what Commissioner Scholl, I do think is in order, is from a policy perspective, that the Board of County Commissioners takes a look at the policy. What I have not liked is this has been implemented by administration, Gary. We have not had a single work session where we have been able to offer our own opinions on what these policies going forward could be. I am not totally against EDI. But what I am for, we all have personal stories. I was raised in the 1960s in a black and white television on our farm, and that's where we got our news. I watched the assassination of President Kennedy as a 6-year-old. I cried and watched the funeral. Fast forward to the assassination of Martin Luther King, and I says, Mama, why'd they kill that man? I watched Kent State University, where the police came in and hosed down black people. I says, Mama, what's going on? And it scared me. As a white little girl, those events scared me. And I vowed at that point in my life I would never be a part of anything like that. And we all can agree to that. But what has happened, I believe, with the current EID program, the pendulum has swung so far to one side that there's many people like myself who feel disenfranchised. Because I was raised to believe we do not judge ourselves on the content or character or the color of our skin, but we accept all peoples, and we love all peoples. And some of the programming that I have seen that has come out of either you want to call it DIE, EID, IED, I don't even know what we're calling this program anymore. I think an overhaul of the program is in order to look at merit, fairness, and yes, if there are any discrepancies in race or the immutable qualities that Commissioner West was talking about, that needs to be looked at, and it somehow needs to be monitored. Frankly, I don't know what to do on this, Commissioner Scholl, because you have surprised me, you have surprised this commission, and I think a deeper look into the program is in order. To totally defund this, what message does that send to our people sitting in the room and our county staffs. I value all of our county staff, but quite frankly, I don't know what to do about this situation because we have not had what I believe is necessary, and that is a full-fledged policy decision on this, Gary. And unfortunately, we're to the point where tensions are so high right now in society, not just on this issue, but I'm totally prepared to talk about the sheriff's funding. That's what I came in loaded for bear this morning on, and here we are doing this. So I don't know what to do on this, Gary. I think it's unfortunate that there is a move made to defund a program when instead, Commissioner Schull, we can take this program and make it in not only your image and Commissioner Schull's West's image, but inclusive of all peoples, and swing the pendulum back to the center. That's what I want to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas, then Commissioner West, then Commissioner Schull.
Well, I guess going back to my first comments this morning, maybe this is something we can resolve at a later date. I just want to clarify that my memory, and I'm not really fuzzy on this, but I think my memory was that Chair Smith, when you were on the commission back when John Ludlow was the chair, we passed a resolution honoring, I think, essentially, I don't know the exact title, but equity, diversity, and inclusion. And therefore, our administration took the steps to honor the intent of that resolution, and therefore that office was essentially created thereafter. And I recall Emmett Wheatfall being one of those people that helped administer that program. So I don't want that to be put on the current administrator's back that suddenly he did something without direction. The board has not only adopted the resolution and voted unanimously to support the resolution under those principles, but the staff has carried that through. I also appreciate, Commissioner Smith, your comments with regards to, everyone be treated equal. I think sometimes it's our job to make sure, by the way, the flip side of that, the door swings both ways. The flip side of that is we need to ensure that we are honoring that in our practices and our policies to make sure that people are treated equal, hired equally, and all those things. So that's our job as an employer. I just go back. I have found that in government, unless you've been an employer for a long time and had employees for a long time, you understand all the responsibilities that come with it, whether that's private sector or public sector. But in the public sector, there's a bright light shining on us to make sure that we are doing it transparently, we're doing it well, and we're doing it with good intention. And I apologize to my colleagues here that are part of the Budget Committee, the citizen members, for really this conversation. But I do appreciate the fiscal aspects of it, and I think how we administer that as required by law to some degree, how we administer that or what we call it or how we define it, I think is more of a board policy decision than it is a budget decision. But I'm willing to look and talk about the budget aspects of it fiscally. That I think that's within our realm. I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Commissioner West.
Yeah, Commissioner Schull, I totally support, or I guess I totally understand why you brought this forward, and I hear you. Not surprised. I mean, I wasn't ready to do this today, and it gets into a bigger policy discussion. I want to make sure that we at least had a second to continue the discussion as we figure out how we move forward after those comments, and so this period allows us to do that. I didn't want to see the motion just die on the floor. I don't know if there's votes here to do that today, but I do think that what has been uncovered here is a deeper conversation on this issue, and a way to help move the county move forward and show leadership during this difficult time throughout the country that we're wrestling with this topic. And I think it's important that we commit to do that as a Board of County Commissioners. Like Commissioner Savas says, it is completely fair to look at the budget and to see how the budget impacts. But I before we make a policy decision, and we don't are overly reactionary, I'd like to be able to have at least private conversations or group conversations with my colleagues as I just kind of emotionally, threw up all over the proceedings today. But I hope that us as a Board of County Commissioners can commit to doing this work and maybe wrestling this out and figuring this out moving forward, Chair, under your leadership, and some of my colleagues with more experience, like Commissioner Savas and Martha Schrader. Thank you for your friendship and support in all these matters, too. I think there's good work we can do. I don't know if the votes are there today on this specific motion, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to do some work and toil on this further.
Commissioner Shaw and then
Yeah,
Ms.
I just
Lee.
want to respond to Budget Committee Member Smith and Budget Committee Member Savas. This is not a surprise. We are sitting here as the Budget Committee. The chair said, does any member of the committee have any questions or comments about the budget? And I have stated my comment. You got a motion on the table.
Thank you. Ms. Lee?
Thank you. I will be voting against this motion. I don't think we throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that if the commissioners would like to address this policy in more detail in their own work session and see if changes are required, then that's the proper process, not this process. This is about the budget. This is something that we need to have in some form. So I would like to see the commission address it in another manner.
Thank you. Mr. Cernak?
In a similar vein to Ms. Lee, I would just say I think at this time this would be premature without understanding potential impacts to grants and eligibility for other sources of funding for many departments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion to table this for future discussion. I'm not opposed, Mr. Scholl, to what you want to do. But I think cutting the program as a surprise brings the attention to this issue. I cannot schedule, Gary, a policy session in June. We just don't have time. I believe we have time on the calendar in July. If it is the will of the Board of County Commissioners to discuss this, roll up our sleeves, and see what can be done to this program, I'm willing to schedule a policy session as early as July. I mean, I don't have the green sheet in front of me. And then if we can't get to a conclusion, Gary, what's the budget procedure after that?
So if you have a policy session in July, then assuming, unless the board, when you adopt the budget on June 22nd, you could discuss this again, you would continue this program, have a discussion in July. You could always decide to change a program mid-year. You can adjust the budgets all year long, so you don't have to make a decision right now. I would recommend having the policy discussion first.
I'm going to go back to my earlier comment is I believe that the current EID, DIE measures that are being employed across especially corporate America right now have swung so far to the absurd. I don't want to see Clackamas County going down that road, but we do need to address equality and fairness. And all those people who work their fingers to the bone and maybe somehow overlooked, that is a merit issue. But I believe we have merit in this county. Not only do we have the COLA increase, but we have merit pay that's given to our people. So I suspect that the reason for this is just not Mr. Scholl's motion is just not for what's happening at Clackamas County. I suspect, Mark, that the reason for this is what we're seeing in society today. And I don't have to tell you about the commercials. I don't have to tell you about what's happening at Target or the beer commercials or this one, and people are voting with their pocketbooks like crazy. And this is a huge societal issue. There is a motion on the table, on the floor to table this. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who seconded it?
I did. Commissioner Schrader.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Schrader seconded the motion to table Just want to make sure that we're following Robert's Rules of Order. This would be a motion within the other motion.
Motion to
So
table
we
supersedes the original motion, so you have to act on the
Exactly.
motion to table
And
next.
then once we vote on that, depending on the outcome, we either handle or not handle the
Correct.
preceding motion.
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right. Is there any other discussion on the motion to table?
Chair, I believe that the motion to table
And you
ceases
don't-
discussion.
Thank you so much. I don't have my Robert's Rules of Order stuff in front of me, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Could you please call the vote, Tony?
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Ms. Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Zavas.
Aye, to approve the motion to table.
Mr. Cernak.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
No.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Chair Parks.
Aye.
Chair, the result is 9-1.
A question?
So that then kills the preceding motion.
The motion to table would succeed tabling the previous
Exactly.
motion.
Okay, thank you. So
I need to comment.
I'm going to have a comment from Commissioner Smith, and then I'll get to you, Commissioner West. Thank you, appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
So my motion to table was not to kill your motion, Commissioner Scholl, please understand that. But if we did what your motion said, it would have transferred the funding to another organization, where I'm not sure maneuver-wise, I've never seen that done before, and I was concerned about monies going from that. Possibly the money should have been held in abeyance and not given to another department, would have been more palatable, in my opinion. I am dedicated to moving forward on really discussing this policy. And I think we're going to have some people come in and testify before us on what we should do with this. We need to listen to the community. And I think taking an action like this bears community input before we move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner West.
I echo those same comments from Chair Smith. My questions, I guess, is a little bit of point of order. Can you hear me? Sorry. A little bit of point of order is when we say table, to me that means that we come back to readdress this, or can you explain to me exactly the term? Because I don't think anything was killed here today. I think we want to do more work on this collaborative moving forward. I want that to be super clear. There's no intent in my vote to kill necessarily anything, but I do want to be collaborative as we talk about this as a team moving forward. It's not just a budget issue, but it's also a policy issue that's interwoven in this. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to me regarding Robert's Rules what that term tabling means? Does that mean pause?
Motion to table means that you're removing the discussion item from this meeting. So the next meeting or at a future meeting, you can bring it back. But as long as this meeting is still in session, you will not discuss this item.
So a question to that. That motion is occurring at a full budget committee meeting with the citizen members. Granted, it is a policy discussion as much as it is a budget discussion, and the budget committee does not generally delve into policy, of course. So since a motion to table says to bring it up at a future meeting, is that satisfactory to bring it up at just a BCC meeting as opposed to a budget committee meeting?
Correct, because after this week, you don't meet again until September, so this would be a discussion for the Board of County Commissioners that they would discuss at their next meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
Because our meeting is not, got it. All right, thank you so much, I appreciate that. Commissioner West, you still have your card up? Did you have more to? Okay, I just wanted to
Thank you.
double
Sorry.
check in on that. Commissioner Schall and then Commissioner Schrader.
Yes, I heard the term, we need community input. This budget committee is here today to decide, 10 members, to decide on this budget. My motion was based on a specific line item in the budget, which I moved to have the board look at to remove. That was based on my personal opinion and the input from my constituents that form my opinion. I just did my duty this morning, and I don't expect anybody on this committee to get on their phone and ask for community input to make a decision on this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Schrader.
Just another piece of history with, I think Commissioner West, you'll love this, because I know that you are an admirer.
Please speak
I know that
directly
you
into the
admire
microphone.
Frederick Douglass, and I have visited his home in Anacostia, in D.C. So let's just end with this, okay? Because I think it is going to encompass everybody's values right now. Because he was a great man, and he was not a victim. And he emerged from slavery to be one of our foremost stars in this country. Douglass believed in dialogue and in making alliances across racial and ideological divides, as well as the values of the U.S. Constitution. When radical abolitionists, under the motto, "No union with slaveholders," criticized Douglass's willingness to engage in dialogue with slave owners, he replied, "I would unite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong." I think that's what we're really talking about here. I think that's a value statement that I hope we can all agree with. And as we move forward in this discussion, we have to remember the history. We have to remember who we are, what has happened. It's not about, for me, victimhood. It's about being resilient. It's about dialogue. It's about having the tough discussions. So thank all of you today for this very unexpected and emotional conversation.
Thank you. Seeing no other cards up right now, I would like to suggest that we take a 10-minute break. You want to wait?
Oh, we
until
voted,
10?
that's right, excuse me.
Good.
I think that's a good idea.
All right, yeah. 10 minutes, you guys be back at 5 minutes of 10, please. Reconvene the Budget Committee and the discussion.
Microphone on.
Thank you. We're reconvening the budget meeting and continuing the discussion about the 2023-2024 general fund budget. I'm sorry, my mind went blank for just a second. Yesterday, one of the items that had quite a bit of discussion, and I believe even in the public comment had discussion, was the children of incarcerated parents. Rod, would you come forward and talk a little bit more about the funding for that, the revenue sources and funding for that, please? And
Yes, and for the record, Rodney Cook, Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services. And this is Children of Incarcerated Parents. So just to remind people where the funding, how the funding lays out, there was $90,000 of county general fund. There was $10,000 from juvenile, which was general fund. And then there was $22,000 from Behavioral Health Division, and that was from their fund balance. And so the total program, this was a question yesterday, was $122,000. But when you're talking about the county general fund portion, it would be the $90,000, and if you wanted to count juvenile, it would be the 10. But juvenile had opted out, we believe, about 2 years ago, so that must have been subsidized a different way. But I just want to know that's originally where the partnership and the funding came from.
mm-hmm. All right. So 90,000 out of the
It's the county general fund that was given to
which has been
HCS.
eliminated for this budget year at this point.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, very good. Commissioners,
Just quickly, do you recall what that was? It hasn't been for a long time.
What year?
Yeah, what year about did we start paying in the 90,000 or whatnot?
It feels to me, it was in my reign, and I've been out of CFCC for about 3 years, so I think it was at least 5 or 6, 7 years ago. Remember there was a package for child welfare, child abuse. It was involved, this is going to get complicated, but domestic violence was in there. This was in there. So it was kind of a package in lieu of going out for a levy for children's issues. I don't know if you go back that far in history, but that would be Melissa and all those folks. So that's where it kind of came out of.
Yeah, I'm going to guess it's about 5 or 6 is my rough memory.
Okay, all right, thank you. Administrator Schmidt, do you have some thoughts or comments on this? I know it's something that several people seemed very interested in.
Yes, I've heard a lot of comments by this committee yesterday about this program, and it seems a willingness to reinstate it. I could easily do that if that's your direction. One, I just told you the equity office has $60,000 of general fund that's being pulled out. There's 60 right there. I could easily find 30,000 elsewhere in the organization if that's your will. So I just need 6 of you to tell me to put it back in, and we can do that.
I see. All right, thank you so much. Commissioner Schrader.
So moved.
Let's back up. That sounded serious motion.
I love my life.
Okay,
You
we have a
no
motion
idea.
on the table, which would need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir.
Comment, Commissioner
We
Schrader.
have, we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded.
Discussion.
And then let's go to Schrader, and we'll still come back then to West, and then see where we are and see if we can vote. Thank you.
Of course, I would like to see this reinstated because it is a legacy project.
Could you
Just
pull
like
the microphone
just
down?
like RSVP is a legacy project too. I did get an email from a friend of mine who has a PhD in public policy who was willing to work with, actually, Ben, I haven't told you this yet, Ben and I this weekend to look at funding for these kinds of programs. We can vote, I would vote to reinstate today, if that's the will of us, because I believe in the program. However, I would still like to have that conversation about other opportunities for funding this program, possibly through some federal, and also I'd like to do some research with the National Association of Counties to see who's doing what, where, when, and how with a lot of this. So I can be a yes vote today to reinstate this with the caveat that I'd like to continue to look for alternate sources of funding, but at least it'll keep it on the, keep this on the radar if we could. That's.
So what you're considering, what you're thinking is that if the county could fund it like for one more year, then meanwhile, perhaps the community could come up with ways of funding, and I'm sure that, there could be some opportunities to look into there.
I think even sooner than that, and I know that H3S is the master of finding money. I know that because of the grants and how they're funded. So I would just like to keep this as a placeholder now with funding. And then let's see where we can find alternate ways to not use.
Or not have the county
Right.
funded, but maybe
Right.
have community funding. Got
Chair,
it.
just for clarity, my motion was based on the comments from the
60,000.
administrator. Basically, it's just asking us
That
to
he can
direct
get
him
the
to
money.
to find a way.
Right.
So not here to define how you do it,
You
but
just
to
direct me to find it, and
Thank
I'll
you.
find it. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. Good
so
point.
we got a second? I guess we do.
It
Yeah,
was
we
mine.
did, we did.
Yeah. Commissioner West, you had a comment
Yeah,
before the vote?
Just for I'm sorry for being a couple minutes late, I apologize. Just for clarification, it looks like 90,000 was coming from H3, your department, right? A portion was coming from Mary's in behavioral health, and then
And then there was 10,000 from juvenile. So the total need is 122,000.
Okay, and so that would take the pressure off of all those different parts of county funding, from juvenile to behavioral health to you, from you, right?
Christina McMahon is here. She'd like to come forward. She can still fund this program, so her office can still fund it.
Oh, can you clarify? Thank you.
Good morning, members of the Budget Committee. Christina McMahon, Juvenile
Is the
Department
microphone
Director.
on?
Oh, is it on?
It's on, the green light's on.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Just get a little closer to it, Christina.
Okay,
Thank
can you hear me now?
Oh,
Oh, I can hear me now. I just wanted to clarify, we have been a participant in this since inception. Our department has always contributed by interfund transfer to H3S $10,000 a year towards this. In fiscal year 1920, we had some extra resource, so we actually contributed $20,000 that year with the stipulation that we likely won't have this moving forward. So we were contacted this year during the budget process by folks at H3S who told us that because of the situation the county is in, that this contract was going to be going away, and then we didn't need to build it into our contract. $10,000 obviously alone can't meet the need. So we did not include it in our budget proposal based on that information. I was talking with Ed Jones, who's my administrative services manager, and we're trying to figure out what we can move around. But we could renew our previous commitment of $10,000 a year. We can find that. So I just wanted to say that for the record. I don't have an extra $90,000. I've cut about $1.6 million out of my budget this year to meet all the needs. I can't come up with $90,000. I guess I can if you tell me to. Something
No
else
one's
will get
asking you
cut.
to, Christina. You've
Yeah.
more than given. You've more than given to the organization voluntarily over the past 5 years. Thank you.
Right, but if we can do that and it'll help, we are happy to do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
So, thank you for clarifying that. So it sounds like to me we have a program that everybody likes and is really good in its outcomes, and it's really great because we spend a very little amount of money and we get really, really great outcomes in the long run that saves the community lots and lots of money down the road. So it's a great preventative program, and it helps a population that is vulnerable and often can't advocate for itself. And so we are stepping up. Maybe your contact this weekend after the theater at happy hour can get together with us, right? We're supposed to get together this weekend anyways, and look to help find that community support and additional funding, and helping bring that pressure off of our budget. But until then, I am definitely supportive of the motion. We'll be voting yes today as we do our work as electeds to try to help bring you guys additional community resources for this program to bring pressure off of your budgets, right? We have other contacts and connections that care about this issue, and maybe we can collaborate to help make this have more long-term viability than having to be on the chopping block unnecessarily during a budget cycle.
Sounds great.
And this is somewhat related, but I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, seeing no other cards, I'd call for the vote, but Ms. Schrader, Commissioner Schrader.
Comment, I'd also like to keep on the table, not with a motion or anything today, but I'd like to keep on the radar my friend's program, John Mullen, who was our person who innovated this, and that's the RSVP program. That's the volunteer program. I don't want to call for a vote for it. I just want to keep it on the radar right now, because the other thing that I would like to do is not only for this program, but for the volunteer piece, see if we can find alternate funding that doesn't impact our general fund. So I just wanted to say that I will try and do my best for that, and I will vote yes on this right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other cards up, would you please call for the vote, Tony?
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Commissioner Schull.
Aye.
Mr. Cernak.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Ms. Lee.
Yes.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Chair Parks.
Aye.
Chair, the result is 10-0.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. Gary, I would like to revisit some unresolved issues with the sheriff's budget, if you would, please.
Yes, remind me, sorry, how may I assist you? I'm sorry, I've spaced out. What?
I think we need points of clarification on comments that the sheriff made regarding the budget, the actual actions taken by this board, and I would like to call on Sandra Montoya for points of clarification.
Yes. So Sandra, this is the comments you made on Monday at the ELED about the $3 million or so. Can you clarify that, please?
Good morning, Sandra Montoya, Budget Manager. Thank you for the opportunity. There have been a number of misstatements or confusing statements regarding the Enhanced Law Enforcement District and the county and also the levy and cost allocations. Really, what this boils down to is a couple of things that are all playing in together, but they are separate and distinct. So the first one that I will discuss briefly is allocated costs. What that is just overhead. I believe Chair Smith said it probably best when she said, think of the utilities that we pay in our households. We have to get those paid, and if you are sharing the costs, you wouldn't think of just sharing a portion. You need to share all of those costs. So for example, you wouldn't just split 50% of a water bill and then you keep the rest and pay for it. If you were in a business, you would go broke without covering all of those overhead costs. So in the past, the general fund has subsidized the cost allocations. This was learned or clarified through a consultant that was hired in November of 2022, and we redid the calculations again at the consultant's recommendation, and we determined that that needed to be spread across all of the departments. Every department in the county has received an updated amount. Almost all have an increase, some substantial increases. There are a few departments that I mentioned yesterday that have a decrease, so I don't want to say all, but nearly all. The only department that is having an issue with this change is CCSO. Every other department understands this is a cost of doing business, and the general fund has been subsidizing. And as County Administrator Schmidt said, nobody was complaining in prior years when the general fund was subsidizing. But now that the general fund is needing to tighten its belt and looking for funding in all areas in order to preserve jobs and in order to, for certain, get the courthouse payments made, without a doubt, we are doing that. We are looking for that. But now we're getting the complaint. So that is cost allocations. That's the increase in cost allocations. Another was, and I should say that cost allocations does equate to an increase to Enhanced Law Enforcement District and also the levy, because they are also recipients of the services of the county. So it's equal. It's not an oversharing of those costs. We're not overburdening those programs. It is an equitable distribution of the cost that the county has been bearing for 21 years. So that is one. The second point that I would like to make is that there was a mention of the 3.7 million. The way that that 3.7 million was mentioned is in CCSO's email to County Finance. They identified that 3.7 million of the administrative costs were distributed to their programs in, I believe it was the 22-23 year. And I showed yesterday that the cost is roughly 15 million for administration. So if all they did was look at 3.7 million, the larger portion was going undistributed. And so what the budget team did is we calculated the difference, so 15 million, and I'm rounding numbers, but the 15 million subtracting the 3.7 million, and that difference was then also spread based on their same methodology. So nothing different, nothing underhanded, all above board. And again, we even used their methodology based on FTEs. So again, very transparent. I also raised the issue that the difficulty that the budget team had and the finance had is that while CCSO said that they were already distributing their overhead costs, their administrative costs to their programs, in the accounting, in the system, it was not apparent. It was not transparent. Again, one of you said it best early this morning, and I'm sorry if I overheard your conversation, but you said something to the effect of, you love math, because it's very evident. You can see the 2 + 2 numbers make sense. And that is the way it is in auditing. One of the basic principles in auditing is that you have to be able to get back to the number. And it shouldn't just be that person A is able to get to that. It also needs to be every person who comes behind that needs to be able to follow that trail and get to the same numbers. That is the problem that we have been having in our conversations with CCSO, is that while they have been saying that they are taking certain actions, when we look in the financial system, those transactions are not apparent. So one of you said, that maybe we need to do an audit. The county, we go through an audit every fiscal year. We have independent auditors that review our transactions and attest that they're certifying without an opinion, meaning they didn't find anything that would cause them concern or raise a level of risk that would say that we are doing something inappropriate. We would welcome that sort of review. We have no problem with that sort of review. So I'm trying to think, is there any other point, Chair Smith, that you wanted me to cover or anything that was unanswered?
No, I'm prepared to make a statement.
I'm sorry. I did have one more point, if I may, and that is that CCSO mentioned that we are trying to take levy dollars and that was inappropriate or underhanded or illegal, and I can assure the public and our employees that nothing could be further from the truth. If anything, what we are trying to raise the bar to is be transparent in your activity. It is wrong to show or to come to the Budget Committee and request one way of doing business, one methodology, but then behind the scenes do something else. That is what has been happening in the last couple of years, and it always hasn't been apparent because we didn't have a good enough financial system in place or tracking in place in order to call that out. There was a sense of it, but we couldn't call it out. It hasn't been until the last couple of years where we have really tightened up our financial processes that we are now getting a handle, and we can very clearly show this is the money that you're requesting, this is what you're spending and where you're spending it. And we are able to call it out and say, this isn't right, we need to get this corrected. And that is what we're doing now, much like with the vacancy savings, where we're saying we don't have to budget at 100% for all of the positions for the full year, because the reality is every year you have 6.8% of vacancies. That savings, that equates to savings that can be used to balance the budget. That in a nutshell is where we're at. Oh, and consistency. That's one thing that changes every year is the lines where things are budgeted and coded to. That makes tracking those numbers very difficult, and it lacks transparency. So one of the things that Gary mentioned was switching a couple of years ago to a chart of accounts that was uniform across the county and across the districts and the agencies. The reason for that is so that we could report on it, so that we could track on that in a transparent manner. If the departments are allowed to shift lines and change their practices from year to year, that consistency gets blurred and it becomes really difficult to track and monitor. We want that consistency from year to year so that we can report on it. And you all saw that in April, we brought to you the first revenue and expense reports for every fund across the county. And we said that is the level of reporting that we want to bring to you consistently. We want to be transparent. We want people to be able to rely and have confidence in our numbers and show that we are properly using the taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montoya. Commissioner Savas, then Commissioner West, then Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, appreciate everything that Sandra has just shared with you all, and I just want to build on the latter point about the levy, or the claim that the levy is being misused, I guess. The levy dollars are being misused. I'll use the most polite word, not the words that are being spread out there, which is I just think is grossly incorrect. I think a history lesson is really, really important here. And as I heard some of the media overnight, it became really clear to me I should probably share this with you all. And that is that way back in 2011, when I first came on the commission, the sheriff was at time to renew the levy. So I'm saying two things there. Number one, the levy was already in place. And number two, the levy was up for renewal in 2011. And when I met with the sheriff individually and his staff, I said, geez, we were talking about the budget crunches we were experiencing at the time, always, right? We always have budget crunches. And I pleaded with the sheriff at the time. I go, you got to realize we're in this time. I'm seeing trends, Sheriff Roberts, where the costs are now exceeding the revenues that are coming in. And the levy is a tax base of sorts, a temporary tax on the property taxes. You should ask for more because you need to make up for this gap, right? The general fund's giving you more, but it can't keep up with everything you're doing. So if you want to do all this, please raise it. And he had his consultants, and his consultants gave him advice saying, well, geez, if you ask for more in this particular climate, and granted it was a recession or coming out of the recession at the time, that it would possibly fail. I said, well, I think there's a lot of support, for public safety, and if it's a small enough increase, we got to get ahead of this thing where we're getting eaten alive. I call it the jaws of death, really, where, again, costs exceed revenues. So long story short, he went out for the same amount of money, and it passed overwhelmingly. I think it's like 70-some-odd% at the time, and so here we are. So Sheriff Brandenburg came on. We had this conversation again, and I applaud her for asking for more, and she did, and for the same reasons. We had the same conversation, and I met, frankly, in years since 2011 with the Sheriff's Department here and there. I've been invited over to their offices. We talk about it. I draw out why we in this, and talk about expenses and what we need to do to build ourselves out of this compression where we can't really deliver the services. And so mind you that if you read the ballot language of 3-502, which is the 2011 measure to renew, and the 3-566, you'll see some similarities. But never in all these times or in this language was there anything where somehow the levy monies were treated in this unique fashion that they are now being espoused to be. That somehow it's protected money or whatnot. The intent was to augment public safety, sheriff's office facilities, and there was some definition of that. X amount of deputies, X amount of jail beds, maintaining. You can all read that for yourselves. I won't get into detail. So if there's anything, any funding stream the sheriff has that is really truly protected to some degree, it really is the district, the ELED. That is actually its own jurisdiction, if you want to call it that. It has its own responsibilities, unique. The levy is not. The levy doesn't have those restrictions. But I think we need to be mindful that there never was any prior treatment of the levy in any way unique like it's being espoused to be today. it was designed to augment services. It was designed to deal with some of this inflationary, at least in the conversations I had. And lacking any language that says differently, I'm going to assume it's business as usual. This is not a new levy. It's different. It's a little bit upgraded, but there's been a levy in place all this time. So I just think when I said yesterday that the monies are there, the monies are there, and the monies ought to be expended with voter intent to hire the deputies and provide the services, maintain the jail beds, and do the drug enforcement, all that stuff. Have complete, faith in the rank and file that they really want to see and do that work, and they take that work seriously, and they want to protect our community. The other thing that I mentioned, I think is really important, I mentioned it last night at the hearing, is, we're all talking about all these, oh, my budget was cut X, or was cut $5 million, and so on and so forth, and it's like we're making this, I think, a false, putting out there a false statement or a false narrative that the sheriff's budget is in this great, huge jeopardy. Well, again, the voters passed the levy, there's resources there, but and as I pointed out, if you look at tab 20 for the sheriff's levy, tab 2019, look at the budget, add up all those pages of services, and you're going to see there are millions more dollars available than there were last year. And last year, from the year prior, there were millions available. We cannot dismiss the fact that the budget says one thing and the political narrative out there appears to be something else. And I think the public needs to know that, and I would ask that Public and Government Affairs focus on that, because I don't think that's really being put out there as much. I know we're trying, but I think that's important. Now, the other thing I said yesterday, I just want to whether it's head nods or fingers up or thumbs up, but I just want to I thought about this too. I know you heard me say on Monday, some of you, and yesterday, that perhaps we ought to have either an audit or a mediator or some financial expertise come in, a consultant to guide this disagreement or how we do our books and so forth, and get this fixed, right? The public deserves better. The public doesn't need to be misled, whether that's intentionally or not. I don't think it's intentional, but as others argue, it is intentional. But the point is that the public really needs to know what's really going on. They want to see that our government work well and work well together. They don't want to see this friction and disagreements. They deserve better, and I totally agree with that. But I said that maybe in a future time we ought to, hire that or do that or bring that up. And I ask you, and I think about this, it would be more powerful if it comes from the Budget Committee. You all had to endure a lot of time and effort and scrutiny because of all of this. So maybe that ought to be a topic. Do you want to see us do that? It doesn't have to be a vote, but I just think that it's important to do that. If you feel you want the Board of County Commissioners to deal with that separately, that's fine too. But I thought maybe you all feel, the public citizens of the Budget Committee and my colleagues feel that maybe this is the time to do it, and do it as a statement of the budget going forward. I think that'd be more powerful from all of us than it would be from just the Board of County Commissioners. Chair, that's my point.
Thank you so much. Commissioner West and then Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair Parks. I have a few questions and things to clarify. I keep saying this because it's totally true, being new. This is my first county budget process ever, and it's a doozy. And as I sit here and learn, and it's like, being at the other end of a fire hose, the wrong end of the fire hose, and I saw the two groups of different professionals working out their different processes that we all witnessed and the whole county witnessed, I left away feeling that something was hidden and still not clear. Not from you. Not from Ms. Comfort's department, and not from our budget manager, Ms. Montoya. Not at all from you. You presented in a way that I thought brought some clarity and education to me about your due diligence and best practices that are standard in trying to elevate our county to adhere to that. We hadn't always measured met that bar, but we're really trying now. And in private conversations with the two of you and with Gary here, that's what has been, I believe, has been proven. But if there's still too many questions about human journal entries and things not being, certain administrative costs not being distributed amongst the department, and things not pluses and minuses, and it feels like this government agency needs a little sunlight. It's the best disinfectant, right? And so as a taxpayer, I want every governmental agency to be efficient as possible, the best use of tax dollars, to be transparent, to have appropriate oversight. Our state right now is really struggling with transparency and oversight. We just saw the Secretary of State resign because of it. I want to see our government function in full transparency. That's how we have the best and most respected law enforcement agency. We have the best CCSO is when it is transparent, when we have confidence in how those dollars are being spent and how they're being allocated to the rank and file and the deputies. And as the new guy, I didn't leave the last 2 days feeling that that's what had happened. And I'm just being honest by, I'm not a budget expert, I'm not an accountant, but I think a lot of citizens in this county felt exactly how I feel right now. And maybe the best process is a robust audit to make sure that we have those questions answered. I'm not opposed to that. Maybe it's our two finance departments getting into a room and I don't know if that's even possible, and figuring it out. It sounds like math is math, and you're not entitled to your own sets of facts. Wait a second. I think there was Senator Monahan said to President Nixon, frankly, sir, with all due respect, you are entitled to your own opinion, but you are not entitled to your own set of facts. And sometimes I felt like we were getting our own set of facts with a political spin, and the public needs to remember that the sheriff is a politician. And she has her own massive department, and she's been siloed at times away from the county, and you create your own little organization, and it becomes an echo chamber, and it becomes, separate, and that's not necessarily healthy and lends itself to needing more transparency. That's what I left away feeling yesterday and a little bit sleepless last night. I don't know how we resolve that, but I think we must. We can't let this question linger. It is toxic to the health of the county and of the organization. We can't have the chasm unbridged between the two. And then I just took some time, because I didn't sleep well. I took some time last night and reviewed some of my notes. Thank you to the staff for making sure I came well prepared. Maybe I'm just a neophyte, and I can handle the criticism if I am. The question still has never been answered why her administrative budget is so heavy, $12 million plus in operational and finance, as well as $818,000 towards her media, movie studio, PIO, staff. Why, if we're talking about the hardworking, non-sworn and rank and file deputies being fully funded, how in good conscience can I fund a bloated, unaccountable administrative portion of her budget at the expense of deputies? Like I said earlier, our budgets are value statements. She seems to really value really bloated administrative staff, which isn't transparent, and I value deputies. Our budget funds all deputies. She has duplicative services. Why does she get a full comms department, a full finance department, working in silo away from one another, creating a chasm and a tension within the county when it's a duplicative service, when if we just had a streamlined process and it wasn't duplicated, we probably have more money for more essential services and core services within the county. I can't justify this. I don't understand why we demand that no other department have duplicated services and pays allocated costs and all that, but we don't of the sheriff. I don't understand that moving forward. I still am a little bit fuzzy on how the levy works. Commissioner Savas, you helped a little bit with this. And maybe I'm misunderstanding this, though. If we ask are we asking at all, and maybe bring it back to me again, are we asking at all that the levy fund or support the general fund? And if we do, are we not asking the taxpayers to pay the tax twice? I think is some of the argument and confusion I'm hearing. I'm still not totally clear on the levy thing. I feel like we're getting there a little bit, but I know that, and just, will we ever use the levy so the other argument that's been made and I'm not clear on is, we have a general fund, and the sheriff, I think, is saying we have to fill all of the positions within the general fund, then I get to use my levy, but if not, and I can't hire anybody, if people are leaving to wherever, because she was saying that people are leaving, it doesn't matter where they're leaving, but they're leaving, maybe it's because of the culture within the sheriff's office, maybe. If they're leaving, then are we never spending this levy fund? As a taxpayer, did I agree to this tax increase that would never be spent and she gets to just hoard it? Or, like, how does this, this dynamic is still unclear because I am new to this, and I don't know if those are my two questions and my thoughts. I think we must find a way, one, to recap, to make sure the sheriff's budget is accountable and transparent with all the sunlight possible that we require of any agency, regardless of the political blowback, because it's the right thing to do. It's being good stewardship. Two, please help me understand her duplicative processes and how we streamline that, because that's also best practices, and that's what we're chartered to do. And then I still need help with the levy. I guess that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Next, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I find a huge irony regarding the sheriff. The sheriff position is a political position, and she is poisoning our entire public safety programs with the accusations that we're taking money away from her levy. And Gary Schmidt's going to bring some numbers forward, that the sheriff's budget is the largest budget in sheriff's history. And I'm saddened by the fact that she's not willing to sit down with us and bring her finance staff to figure out the new chart of accounts and their inability to compile their fund balances on a monthly basis, just like the rest of the county has done. When she said she was going to cut 34 positions, it's the sheriff who has defunded her own program. It's the sheriff who is defunding police while this board sits here and defends the police. What a cruel irony that is, and the lie that's perpetuated on every single employee of the sheriff's office, and it's a cruel lie perpetuated on the public. I will not stand for that. The question that we all need to ask, including in the media, is why is she doing this? And Sheriff Brandenburg, what are you afraid of if we take a deep dive into your budget? We have guaranteed her more money should there ever be a shortfall. We have guaranteed, our administrator has guaranteed more money if what she say is true, but we know it's not going to be true. That's why we made the guarantee. But yet she still won't accept that. After we said that on Monday night, after we said that yesterday on Tuesday, she still went out in the media and espoused her lie. Now, Commissioner Savas has made a very good point. What do we need to do, Gary, to have an audit and a mediator? Now, is that a question for the Budget Committee, or is that a policy discussion that we have later? I want to know that thing, and then I'll ask you another question.
Commissioner Savas is recommending there boards more power if this committee recommends it, but that's ultimately a board decision, a policy decision of the board. But this is more of a symbolic statement if this committee were to make it, but it'd be ultimately a policy decision of the board.
And I do agree that we should make a symbolic statement on that, and let's get to the bottom of this. Just a moment,
If the Budget Committee were to make a recommendation that I'm trying to clarify things in my brain here. That's not part of the budget considerations, or it is part of the budget considerations? Help me out there.
And your primary focus is the budget. You can make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. You're an advisory body to the board, so you can make a recommendation to the board to do certain actions.
Yeah.
And let me finish, please.
Yeah.
All right. And it saddens me that the sheriff is pitting her office against the whole public safety system. And that's a sad day in Clackamas County. And yesterday, when District Attorney John Wentworth came on, I was so grateful for his statement when he said, "The replacement of the courthouse is essential to do our work in law enforcement. Public safety does not end when a Clackamas County deputy arrives at the scene." And as I explained yesterday, there is an entire path. Officer arrives at the scene, either they're arrested or not, they're taken to the jail, they are arraigned, they are prosecuted from the DA, and are heard in a court of law, of which we have in Clackamas County. And we are very deficient in having court space to prosecute criminals, and that's why it was very important that we build this courthouse. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with a 50% funding match from the state of Oregon to do this, because the Oregon judicial system saw that counties were not buying courthouses because we couldn't afford them. The Oregon judicial system reminded us all that it is a core constitutional duty that counties supply courthouses. It's not exactly our choice, but they are affording us a pathway to do this, and we can do this. The only thing we've asked from the sheriff is the same things that we've asked from every single department. Reduce your redundancies, quit building systems that not only are ineffective but duplicative, and come and sit down with us and let's go over the budget. I am ready to make a motion, an advisory motion from this body to initiate a full financial audit of the financial systems of the sheriff's office and bring in a mediator to get going on this process.
I'll second that motion.
There's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. Before we go any further for a moment, I want to stop and ask Mr. Karn to speak. I think he needs to leave us momentarily, so.
Thank you, Chair Parks. Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I have a conflict that's going to require me to leave. I first want to say thank you for allowing me to participate in this process. Thank the Board of Commissioners and my citizen colleagues for their efforts and all of the efforts. I know this is not easy. I know that this has been contentious. The one thing that was important to me, both as a citizen and a member of this committee, as I am a huge supporter of law enforcement, and I believe everybody sitting here next to me is also. And so I was speaking with Administrator Schmidt yesterday about the promises that were made, and just wanted to reiterate those, and the fact that the county's budget will fully fund the sheriff's office. It will guarantee no layoffs, and it will also upstaff any hiring that the sheriff chooses to move forward with based out of the ELED or the levy fund. So putting more law enforcement professionals on the road. This is very important to me, and as we heard from the community, very important to them. That gives me some assurance with those guarantees that this would be the right thing to do and the right direction to move. So with that said, I apologize, I'm gonna have to leave, but thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry you won't be able to be with us the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we have a motion on the floor, which has been seconded, and we also have three cards up. Two of them were up before the motion, so I want to check and see if what they have to say is still viable at this point with a motion on the floor, or to wait. So Ms. Lee and then Mr. Cernak.
Does it fit within, Chair, does that fit within, point of order,
Thank
Does it
you.
fit within the discussion period of the motion? Is it applicable to the motion, so it can just be moved, their comments can be moved into the discussion period? Just curious, just to streamline for time. So when you make a motion and there's a second, then there's discussion, so I'm wondering
Right,
if
and
these
now just-
comments fit within the discussion of the motion.
That's what I want to make sure of. Does it, what they have their cards up for, does it fit within that, or would they wait until,
I can hold my comments
okay?
after the motion.
Not necessarily part of the discussion about the motion.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Ms. Lee?
Yes, my comments are applicable to the motion. I support the motion. I think that the sheriff and the staff and all of us understand that people were, I guess, truly believing their position. There's a great misunderstanding as a result of that. But I think what we really need to do is a forensic audit, which means going back and looking at how things are put together and how they need to be put together in the future. And whether or not that requires mediation, that may be an added necessity. But I feel great comfort in hearing the commissioners yesterday speak to not laying off any sheriff staff, supporting moving forward with new staff under the levy. And as a result, I think this can be dealt with after the budget approval.
Thank you so much. Administrator Smith?
I have a recommendation for the committee to consider. A financial audit, we already do that every year as part of the county's financial audit. It includes the sheriff's office. Would you perhaps consider, and it's a different, instead of forensic, I prefer the term performance audit, where you look at systems and processes of how the sheriff's office and the finance office are working to see what works and what doesn't. I think that is a real issue, if you'd consider that for your motion. Thank you.
So are you suggesting that that be the motion?
Well, no, instead of the finance, just change, instead of financial audit, a performance audit.
That's what I mean, yeah.
As
change
maker of
that
the
to-
motion, I can do that. Commissioner Savas, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought the way the chair worded her motion would open the door for that, and I think that is the specificity that's needed, so thank you for that, and I would certainly support that
Okay.
clarification.
Yeah.
And
Do I need to
just,
resecond it?
just to double check on that, Sandra, could you read the motion back, please? Do you have that, or does Tony have that? Oh, I'm sorry.
The motion is an advisory motion from this body to initiate a full financial audit of the financial systems of the sheriff's office and bring in a mediator to get going on this process, seconded by Commissioner West.
Is there an amendment to that motion, Chair Smith?
Yes, I did amend it. I
Can you
amended
just
it.
clarify before I resecond it? Just for clarity,
I
sorry.
think the word performance audit needs to be
So I
included.
call
Yes,
it
Yeah.
the word
financial
performance.
performance audit. That's
Yeah.
will be the term.
Financial performance
And-
audit.
And I will second that
As a second,
amendment.
you're okay with that? Okay.
I am fine with that, yes.
So Gary, that would include systems as well, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is still on the table, it's been amended, we're good with that. So comments to the motion, Mr. Cernak?
Yeah, and I think my question's probably for Elizabeth and/or Gary. Is this something that we would request the Secretary of State's office to conduct, or would we hire an outside auditor, or both?
Actually, I would recommend we'd ask our internal auditor first what her recommendation is, whether that's a function of her office. She has contractors on call that she could do, or we would do a bid process for an external auditor.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
all right. Mr. Rhodes,
Thank you. In extension to Mr. Cernak's question,
into the microphone, please.
and in extension of Mr. Cernak's question, what type of time frame and cost could we anticipate with this?
Well, cost is a good question. Again, I'd ask our internal auditor what her capacity would be if she would do it herself, and if that would be within her budget. If not, this would something I would fund in the administrator's budget, or office budget. I have funds available for requests like this. So, but we'd have to certainly find out what that cost would be. And I would bring that back to the board before final approval. And timeline, you all tell me. I mean, everyone's pretty busy, so it'd have to be after July 1st to start the process.
can
And
wait.
it could be
That'd be
from,
fine. That'd be
it'd be
fine.
a 1 month to 6 month process. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Salas had his card up, but his comment's going to wait until after the vote on this. So, Tony, could you please poll the group for the vote, please?
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes,
Abstain.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Ms. Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Mr. Cernak,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Transparency is important. Aye.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Chair Parks,
Aye.
Chair, the result is 8-0-1.
Thank you so much. It passed. And just for clarification for myself, now that becomes one of the amendments to the budget when we vote on that?
We'd probably note it as a budget note and then pass it on to the Board of Commissioners for action. Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be included?
Sandra or Elizabeth, please comment.
Gary, I would probably recommend that we take it from contingency because your 23-24 budget took a big hit, and I don't know it well, but I would imagine that you're going to have a hard time getting there.
I'm sorry, I don't think that was your question, how to fund it. It was, how are we noting this action today?
Oh.
Yeah, how do we,
Okay,
how do we note it?
that's-
Budget note, is it just in the
Does it become part
minutes?
of the budget?
So if
Motion.
Gary believes it's already within his operating budget, then we'll just make it in the notes of the minutes.
And it will be included in the budget notes, period, because it was a motion.
It'll be in, yeah, in all the budget notes. Okay,
So it is
so,
action.
yeah, when we get to that point of voting on the budget, it won't need to be one of the amendments that's read out. Thank you. That was what I wanted to clarify. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, a couple things. Administrator Schmidt has mentioned last couple of days here that he withheld some allocated cost assignments to several departments, including the Sheriff's Department. And some of those went on for a number of years. And I just want to say that I'm not here asking for any action today or any recommendation, but I, for one, recommend we never do that again. Because what that does is that builds and builds, and then it's a big sum, and then, of course, then it's a big hit. And I think in some ways, if the Sheriff Department knew that it was being withheld, which they did, they could have adjusted and gotten ready for it and accepted it. But instead, it's been used as a political tool here, apparently. So I'm hoping that we don't do that again, and we actually put those out there, period, incrementally, just like all inflationary things. It's just gradual. It's a normal course of business, and it's not seen or misused in the future. One of the things I wanted to mention to when we talk about the allocated cost and everything else, and yesterday I asked staff to put together a graph, and it's probably in your packet. Y'all got this one piece of paper with the graph of the spike. My point of doing this was to show, if you can see how substantial that spike is, that inflationary spike, that also added on to that hit, besides just withholding the allocated cost, is that the inflationary aspects, which are a reflection of overhead cost, synonymous to allocated cost, that this also aggravated it and became a bigger, so to speak, a political tool that used against us. And as I said yesterday, no good deed goes unpunished by keeping or holding them harmless for a couple, 3 years. But it is what it is. So those are two comments I wanted to make. And now I have a question for you, Gary. And the question is that, we have done something unique this year. We had two budgets, yours, or staff's budget, and we had the sheriff's budget. Obviously we didn't want to cut any positions, so we chose ours. What else can we do? What other options are there for budget control, line iteming? What if we were to go the next step or two, if we had to, what else could we do as the board of directors who controls the money? Can we actually just budget entirely, have more control over that budget, and just simply make sure we're providing the funds and the services to the Sheriff's Department?
The Board of County Commissioners has full authority over every dollar that comes into Clackamas County, not just general fund, every funding source, federal, state, levies, taxes, fees. You're the governing body. You can budget down to the line item, to the position if you wished. You have total authority to do that across the board all year round, not just when you create the budget. So you do supplemental budgets all year round. As far as financial systems, I'll throw it out there. We could totally centralize finance in this entire organization, that everything is done through the finance department. Now, that would cause some shifts in employees because Elizabeth and her team can't do it right now. I hesitate to do that, but that's an extreme choice that I could recommend to the board that you could then take. Every financial action is centralized through one office. Because right now it's decentralized. That is an extreme action, but you could direct that.
And to points that have been made, not just by myself, but others here, that would save us money, by the way. It would save us money just in the centralization of it and the efficiencies of it and not having duplicative staff. I think Commissioner West brought that up as well. I had one other thought, but I forgot it. I'll bring it up when I remember.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner West?
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Savas, we had a very important motion, and we jumped off we jumped off script a tiny bit, I guess, or I don't know if there's probably no script, we're doing this. So my question is around the duplicative services.
Could you bring the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
closer?
Yeah, my question is around duplicative services. So without cutting any FTE, can we streamline that and pull those FTE over to the county as staff to work with Ms. Comfort's department to not create this two-system siloed effect that we were all dealing with and that the public witnessed? Would that bring more transparency? Does it save us money? And can we also do that potentially with her communications staff? Because that seems duplicative too. We have those services already for the county. Why are we asking taxpayers to pay for them twice? And then eventually, I still have those levy questions, but I'm sure we'll get to them. But yeah, I just wanted to circle back because I think that this is an important. It's really hard to have confidence with the rank and file and the deputies when all they see is bloated services, and then they're not getting what they need, or bloated administrative costs, and they don't get what they need, and then there's no transparency with that administrative portion of her department. And I think that's also just an ethical thing to see how we can remedy that issue.
Thank you.
Chair, I did remember what I had forgotten to mention. One thing I wanted to say that I want to truly thank everyone who wrote us, emailed us, even though they were barking at us, even though they were misinformed, even though they were angry for something we really were not doing, but we were actually doing the right thing. I want to thank everyone who testified also and called, knocked on doors or whatever, texted us, approached us. I want to thank them because you know what it told me? Number one, they're passionate about law enforcement. They're passionate about their safe communities. They're passionate about this. And it just reinforces our interest in the same. We're all aligned on this. And I think that has been the most powerful thing for me. And it tells me that we are doing the right thing, and I have any kind of guidance we can get by the public and anyone else, especially those in the industry, because we don't know. I think the sheriff made a good point, if anything else. And it goes without saying. We don't know their profession like they do, which all the more reason requires a collaborative, cooperative relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion at the table at the moment, I believe, Sandra?
Thank you, Chair Parks. I did want to answer the levy questions. I wrote them down, so hopefully I've got everything that you asked. So Commissioner West, you asked, are we saving general fund dollars at the expense of the levy? And the answer is no. Again, allocated costs, we were subsidizing, and now we're no longer going to be subsidizing. So that additional cost is being distributed to all of the users. And there's lots of different methodologies in there, but the primary one, that's the easy one to think about, is FTEs. when we distribute allocated costs to the departments, we allocate it to the administrative program. So only one program. That's where we in finance send it to. And as you heard, the departments are then able to identify what method they will distribute down those allocations to their programs. In CCSO, what we heard is they distribute it based on FTE. So it's only charged once because the FTE isn't in two places. So it's, or if they are being split, it's split, let's say like 50% in this program, 50% in this program, but it's not like, they're not cloned. You know, it's, you're not going, one person doesn't equal two. It's only one person. So only one time is that allocation being charged, it is not being duplicated. I believe part of the misunderstanding is that the sheriff's office is saying the administrative costs, their internal costs, are being duplicated. And the answer to that would be it isn't transparent, and that's what I shared, is that if you were truly collecting revenue for your administrative costs, we wouldn't see the general fund covering 100%. It would be evident that you were getting revenue for that and that general fund support was being reduced. So to answer your question simply, are the costs being duplicated? No, they are not.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
When you said it isn't evident, that word sticks out to me. It isn't evident. Is that a highly irregular practice to not be able to see that evidence necessary within standard and ethical budgeting practices?
Well, I've only been with the county 3 years, so I can't speak to before. What I've heard from people is, what I've heard from staff, is that under the old chart of accounts, there was an account where you could capture that. It's called indirect costs. And that was, you could capture it, segregate it, run reports on it. When we went to the new chart of accounts in 2021, we did away with that. And we did away with it for 1 year until the department started complaining and saying, we can't track our stuff. Please add this account code back in, and that was done. So we've now had it for 2 years, and the rest of the county has been using it for 2 years. So we have been asking for CCSO to do the same so that we could track that distribution of administrative costs in their own programs. So it's, I know CCSO would say, well, this is something new. Administrative costs being distributed down is nothing new. It is a very standard practice, and I would say asking them to make it evident in their transactions is something new, but not the actual charging. Every department does that.
So you're saying it is, am I understanding you correctly, that the sheriff being transparent and showing the evidence of those practices would be a new activity from the sheriff's budgeting department?
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
I will let you go to my next question, but thank you for clarifying that.
Commissioner Smith?
I don't know, does any commissioner want to discuss any other items? I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the budget.
Okay, prior to doing that, so we'll hear from West, and then we want to have the amendment regarding children of incarcerated parents read into the record. And I believe I come back to Sandra for that, or would it be Tony? It says Sandra in my script. Just making sure here, so thank you. So Commissioner West.
I just, before we even get to the budget, on making the amendment, and Chair Smith, I have a hard time still, we've talked about it a lot, there seems to be a lot of shared concern about the duplicative services. If we pass the budget as is, we're passing the buck on the duplicative services within the sheriff's budget. I have a hard time reconciling her duplicative services when we have to make sure we're taking care of the deputies and the rank and file within that department and those additional expenses I think it's on this budget committee to make a decision on how to handle her duplicative services moving forward. Maybe I'm wrong in the process, and I could have some guidance. But I wanted to make sure that we don't gloss over that and just approve it as is.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Administrator Schmidt to speak to that.
Yes, I am. I've asked my staff, my leadership staff, to do a review of all internal service departments, centralized service functions, countywide, starting July 1st, of the services that are provided. Are they meeting the needs of departments? The allocated cost model you're hopefully going to approve today, but the next step is, are the services being delivered internally, and are the internal customers getting what they need? So I plan to do a whole review of that, including look at a duplicative, quote, shadow systems, that's my word, of departments, and seeing how to reduce or eliminate them. So if you'll give me a few months, that's my plan internally with staff, and then I'll report back to the board. And then I know it delays it for a while, but certainly for next fiscal year, you'll have the data from the review on what's working, what's not, and how we can perhaps do it differently.
And am I correct that in some other departments of the county, there are also some of the duplicative services?
It's not just the sheriff, it's in other departments as
So you would
well.
want to look at everything?
Correct.
And not just the sheriff's office?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay, all right. Is that,
Yeah, that helps answer my question on the process. I really appreciate the guidance.
okay. Paul, I see you,
Yeah,
but
just
we've
to-
got, before that, we've got Shull and we've got Mr.
I
Rhodes.
just wanted to comment on Commissioner
On that,
West's
okay.
comment, and as is, I also thought that there would also be a function, an oversight function in the last vote we took with regard to recommending, that performance audit.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I feel between what Gary said and the performance audit, I think
I
we're-
can't hear you,
Oh, I'm
Commissioner.
sorry. I thought between the last vote we took with the performance audit and what Gary's statements were, I think combined, we're going to cover that.
Okay.
So I'm sure, I feel confident that we'll get there.
Okay, cool.
Through those
Thank
two
you.
mechanisms.
Thank you.
Okay, fine, thanks. So we have Mr. Rhodes and and Commissioner Shull, or Commissioner Shull and then Mr. Rhodes, whichever way you want to do that.
Yes, Chair Parks, I just wanted to say before the motion is made to approve the budget or not approve it, I just want to talk to the people of Clackamas County for a moment. You heard a motion this morning from the Budget Committee to recommend to the Board of Commissioners to do a study and look at the cooperation and coordination between the county and the Sheriff's Department. I also want people to know that the FY 23-24 budget for the Sheriff's Department will be just a little over $146 million. Of that, $115 million comes from the County 100 General Fund, which is up from last year. And finally, I just want the people of Clackamas County to know that this budget will finance law and order 24/7, 365 in the county. Yesterday, you heard from the county administrator when we had a discussion with the county sheriff that should there be a problem, that we will work very closely with the Sheriff's Department to ensure that their operations are funded. So again, to the people of Clackamas County who have been watching these proceeds, please be assured that your county is going to have a very effective and professional Sheriff's Department in 23-24. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Rhodes?
My question is for Sandra, and you answered most of this. I have two questions. The first one you answered mostly for Commissioner West, but specifically talking about the sheriff's administrative costs, which are new this year, being dispersed not entirely from the general fund, but through the rest of the department. Looking at tabs 19.9 through 19.13, and those are the funds that previously were funded solely by a general fund, and now a portion of them are being shared within other funds of the sheriff's office. And so by my rough math, that's reflected in what is the general support line for those pages, and the portion that's being allocated or billed out to the levy, the ELED, and the contract cities, for example, that my understanding is that's reflected in the charge fees, license permits, and assessments line. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
So my rough
within-
math,
Yes.
if I take out all the other stuff, taking out the grants and a few sundries, that means that approximately $10.9 million covering those departments or those sections would still be funded by the general fund. And about $3.5 million will then be shared amongst the ELED, the levy, contract cities.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yes, so with the distribution that is being used by the sheriff was, if for 23-24 was 29% being shared by the levy, contract cities, and ELED, and so that leaves 71% that is covered by the general fund, and that is based on the, I believe, based on the FTE split, so where they have those positions, and we used the exact same distribution. So that is why you're seeing so much still remaining in the general fund, is because the general fund still carries the bulk of the employees.
I appreciate that, and it sounds reasonable. My question, and sorry to sound redundant, but the sheriff has said repeatedly that they feel that the ELED levies and stuff are being billed then twice. The taxpayers are paying twice for the same thing. And I can't see that. I can't see where they're paying twice. It sounds like 71% is being paid from the general fund, and then the remaining is being paid from these other things. Can you just help assure me that they are not, in fact, being billed twice for the same function?
I would agree with your remark that that comment doesn't appear to be correct. As I said earlier, the distribution is based on FTE. So the employee is theoretically only working in one program. That one program is what is being charged. So unless an employee can clone themselves and be in two places at one time, they are not being charged twice. It is just once.
That's how I see it. Is there anything I'm missing? Some other avenue or billing function by which the ELED levy or contract cities are paying for that service, and some other function that I just don't see?
Well, and I think that is probably our comment as well, is that if, in fact, what the sheriff is saying is true, then the issue is some accounting that is not transparent, because we've looked for it and can't find it. So if it is there, it's being done with journal entries or in spreadsheets, and then loaded into the system like in totals, where we're not seeing the transaction level, and then that creates another issue that would be solved with the audit that we're talking about. So there is a very slight chance that may be the case, but the more that we've dug into it, the more it just seems that it has not been distributed. And again, I would point to the sheets. This year's fund roll-up, we prepared after the fact. If I showed you the original one that was submitted by the sheriff, what you would see in 23-24 is that once again, the general fund was covering 100% of those administrative costs.
If we did find out that there was some journal entry, fund transfer, some other function by which they were in fact being paid twice, can we remedy that?
Well, and in fact, we actually gave them the benefit of the doubt, because what CCSO told Finance was that they had distributed a portion. So what we did is we took the total administrative costs, we subtracted out the portion that they said they had already distributed, so that it would not happen twice. So even though we couldn't see it, we said, just to be cautious, just to be conservative and not double bill, we subtracted that out and only distributed the difference. So that would take care of any concern that is a duplication of costs.
Thank you. And Chair Parks, if I may, I have a second question, if I may continue. Thank you. This one's a little bit more granular. The sheriff, in yesterday's presentation, said that under the current proposed budget, that and this is a bit granular, but very specifically, the jail would run out of money by October. And I understand that we have a good, strong budget, and that we have a promise that the funding will be there if in fact that did happen. But I'd like to avoid a situation where, if that were true, that we end up owing a bunch of money that we have to fill in. My concern is I've been told that there's an increase in jail medical costs and some things that were not anticipated in the budget, specifically, again, for the jails, and more specifically in the materials and services. Can you speak to that for me, just to reassure me that, in fact, those increased costs this year have been anticipated, and that we're going to, that the proposed budget will fund those expenses, and that we're in the black?
Okay, so yes, I can assure you of that. In budgeting, and you can't see this in your reports because we do it at a very high summary level, but if we could show you the detail making up each of these budgets, what you would see is maybe 40 account codes within each category. And what CCSO is saying is that we made an adjustment in one account code to reduce. And within that account code, what they have found is that it's jail medical. And quite honestly, I can't remember what account code specifically as I sit here. But it was, Elizabeth says it was civil, and I believe that. But it wasn't that I was reducing a particular line. It would be like if in your own home budget, it would be like me cutting out milk. You know, you ran out of milk money, you can't have any more milk for the year. It's not that granular. It is rolled up, and in budget law, it's even more summarized because we approve a budget by the fund, and in this case, because it's the general fund, it's by department. So general fund, CCSO, and it's the operating budget made up of personnel, materials and services, and capital outlay. I know that they would be okay because they have 44 positions vacant, which is an average of 6.8% per year over the last 16 years. So in a 16-year history, 6.8% is their vacancy every year. Those savings should more than cover any reduction that was made to a particular line item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I'm going to build actually on Mr. Rhodes' comments here in a moment, but I just wanted to say it really been thinking about this since Monday. In the back of my mind was rolling around, geez, what if we had, or the Sheriff's Office had properly expensed, built in all these costs and spread them out the way they should be. And that was reflected in outside services provided by the Sheriff's Office to the school district for SROs, the city contracts, and so on, all those other things. And the answer is that I'd love to know what that total would be, maybe whether it would be, annual or last 5 years, last 10 years, how much money perhaps have we really lost that otherwise would go for other internal services in the Sheriff's Department to augment and improve the services to be better utilized. And I think the example that to the granular question that Mr. Rhodes brought up is that, from what I've heard, is the money's there internally. The money's there. It's just not properly, and whether that's how it's done or whatnot, I'm not assigning blame, but I'm very confident today when I look at these numbers that the money's there to do everything we need to do and more. And that's my point. And if it needs to have a budget line adjustment for proper budgeting, we can do that today. We can do that mid-year. We can make those budget adjustments as needed. That's all I have.
Thank you. As soon as we get the amendment read into the budget, you'll be next, according to the script, right? So seeing no further discussion, I'm going to ask Sandra Montoya, our budget manager, to read the one amendment that we have into the original proposed budget into the record.
Thank you, Chair Parks. And before I do that, you all have a sheet before you of changes. These are just housekeeping items, errors that we identified after the budget was published, but budget law says that they have to be provided to you in writing, and that we also have to read them. So if you'll allow me to do that, I can assure you none of these are anything that changes the budget number that you're going to be adopting, but they are changes that I have to just read really quickly. And the first one is in Fund 100 in the non-departmental, and it is moving money from assigned beginning fund balance to Fund 100 unappropriated ending fund balance in the amount of $29,918. That is for the movement of resolution services, leaving the general fund and going into health, housing, and human services. The next one is a shift in account, in Clackamas, the old Clackamas business unit to the new Clackamas business unit. Oh, and if...
Do you all have this sheet, commissioners? This is what she's referring to. It's a one-pager.
Yeah, I don't see mine.
I don't
If you
see
don't
it.
have it, raise your hand. We'll please distribute a copy.
Okay, I can pause while we get you those copies.
I don't see it.
I don't see it either.
Make the motion.
And I apologize, I know you've gotten a lot of handouts.
I do, right here. I don't have,
This morning's distribution.
Oh, this thing?
There we go. I found it, yeah. Found it. Found it.
it's buried under about 100 papers. Thank you very much.
I haven't. I just went through those and I didn't see it, but,
You can use mine.
yeah. All right, thank you, Paul.
Okay, Jan's first.
Okay.
Okay, so the item number 3 is Fund 420 in 150505. We're moving money from the professional services category into the construction category where the money will actually be expensed. And that's for the courthouse. Let's see, this one is multiple funds. We've got auction proceeds that were put in the incorrect line item. We're going to be recategorizing those from bond revenue to all other revenue, and we're shifting money from federal, state, and donations as well. And the very last one is the adjustment for the EDI program for that error of the 60,000. That may now change because I believe that while it was an error that it was in there and we were going to be taking it out, Gary, I need clarification on whether it's now back in.
I'm sorry, where are you at?
The last item, number 5, it was the error for the EDI program we
It's
were
out
removing.
because this is general fund, and I've committed to the board no general fund, so it's coming out.
Okay, so that change is correct on this page. And so now the amendment that Chair Parks is asking for is that, and we're going to be taking it out of your budget, Gary?
So I'm asking you to direct the administrator to find the funds. You don't have to make that answer today, and I will have it for the Board of Commissioners by June 22nd,
Okay.
please.
But it would just be to add that back into the budget.
Yes,
And
and
then we figure
and
out.
you won't need to make any changes to the numbers because contingency is already in an appropriated category. So if it came from contingency, it would be captured. If Gary finds it within his budget, it's already captured. So either way, we're covered.
Okay, very good, thank you. Thank you. I will now entertain a motion on the budget. Chair Smith,
Thank you,
Commissioner Smith, in this case.
Chair. Thank you. Appreciate all the work that everybody's done on this budget. It's been a horrific lift. Our staff has been very good. I want to thank my colleagues on the Board of County Commissioners, and especially thank our Citizen Budget Committee members who have come forward to this and have performed, I feel, miraculously through all this. With that in mind, I move that the committee approve the 2023-2024 budget for Clackamas County in the amount of $1,266,824,392, with appropriations in the amount of $1,144,391,844, and impose the permanent tax rates of $2.4042 per $1,000 in assessed value for Clackamas County City, and $2.9766 per $1,000 in assessed value for Clackamas County Rural, and the public safety local option levy rate of .368 per $1,000 in assessed value, and the amount of $5,559,000 for general obligation bond debt service, with revisions as discussed.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Commissioner Schrader seconded that motion. Open for discussion. Commissioner Shull.
Budget Manager Montoya, could you confirm that the permanent tax rates read by Chair Smith and the public safety local option levy tax rate are unchanged from this current fiscal year?
You are correct. All of the permanent tax rate for the county, for Clackamas County Rural, and the public safety levy remain the same.
Thank you.
Mr. Cernak?
I just wanted to confirm, and I might have misheard, but did I hear .368 cents or dollars per 1,000 for the levy portion for the rate? Because that
.368, it's actually cents per 1,000. That's what the local option levy is.
okay, because this is showing $0.368, and that's why I'm asking.
Okay, my copy has a decimal, .368.
Shows 0.368. That means $0
With a dollar sign.
Correct, that's how we show it, yeah.
So 36.8 cents per
Correct.
1,000.
It's confusing.
Commissioner Shull, you still had your card up? Did you want to?
I'm sorry, Chair Parks.
Right.
I'm done.
It takes time. Okay, motion has been made and seconded, and I will now repeat it. It has been.
Chair Parks, I'm sorry, if I could interrupt just briefly. The beginning fund balance for that move from non-D to resolution services in Housing Authority does change the amount, and I've got a new number for you. I'm really sorry. I have $1,266,000,000.
Go in the first place?
Yes.
The first, okay, say it, begin again if you don't mind, thank you.
1,266,794,474. So I've got $1,266,794,474, and that is the Clackamas County expense after the Budget Committee adjustments.
As maker of the motion, I propose that change.
Thank you.
You,
Yes, it does, Commissioner Schrader.
I'll second that.
Sandra, does the appropriations dollar amount change?
No, total appropriation is this, I'm sorry, total budget is the same, and that is the appropriation number.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so that changed. So we've got, okay, the first number changed. All right, so it has been moved and seconded that the committee approve the 2023-2024 budget for Clackamas County in the amount of $1,266,794,474, with appropriations in the amount of $1,144,391,844, and impose the permanent tax rates of $2.4042 per 1,000 in assessed value for Clackamas County City and $2.9766 per $1,000 of assessed valuation for Clackamas County Rural, and a public safety option levy tax rate of $0.368 per 1,000 of assessed value, and the amount of $5,559,000 for general obligation bond debt with revisions as discussed. Is there any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to poll the vote, please.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Mr. Cernak,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Ms. Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Chair Parks.
Aye.
Chair, the result is 9-0.
Thank you very much. The motion is passed. Is there any other business to come before this committee? And just as we get ready to adjourn, again, sincere thanks to administration for the work that's been done on this, the Finance and Budget Committees and administration, and all of the elected officials and the directors of this huge, huge budget and this county that you all care so much for. And I personally want to thank my vice chair, James Rhodes, for accepting that position. And Ken Cernak, thank you for being secretary. You know, it was a good year, right? So thank you very much, everyone. With that, this meeting is adjourned.